Hi everyone, Szczepan Urbanowicz here to another episode of Go With The Flow, a global watercolor conversation. Thanks for bearing with us. We're now into our 16th group, 16th hour, and we're going for 24 hours for this global watercolor conversation. We've got another fantastic group. I'm going to keep this really short. We've got a fabulous group. And I'll introduce them very quickly. David Poxon, Joe Dowden, Richard Thorn, Julio, Jorge, and Vinita Docheva. Over to you, David. David's our host for today. Go, David.
Hello, everybody, and greetings to the world of watercolor. Now, we've got to say, haven't we, that Szczepan has done a fantastic job to get us all together, the whole world, connect us all up in this watercolor conversation, because we're living in a very strange time, aren't we, with this terrible pandemic which is affecting everybody. However, out of darkness cometh light, which is what we should say to each other as watercolor painters. And somewhere in amongst all this darkness and terrible things that are going on, I think the world personally will get rebooted. And things that we took for granted before, maybe we won't take for granted anymore, and we'll appreciate things that we didn't appreciate before, particularly all the frontline workers, the supply workers, the porters, the people that have kept the whole world going during this terrible time. So, hello everybody again, and I've got some great guests lined up in this little group, and I'm going to kick off by starting off with a guy who lives in a very beautiful part of the UK, England, and he lives in a place called Devon. Wonderful countryside, great scenery there. Now, his name is Richard Thorn, and he is an amazing painter. I found his work personally. He uses incredibly intense colorways, great slabs of colour to describe his landscape work and the countryside around him, and towns, of course, he paints as well. What I found particularly interesting with Richard, personally, was that I found out that Richard is an amazing jazz guitar player as well. And I saw an immediate analogy between his music and his painting. And to me, his paintings are complete songs in themselves. They're a complete melody with a start, a middle eight, and an ending. So Richard, if I can introduce Richard now, Richard Thorn. Richard, could you just tell us a little bit about that connection between music and painting?
Hi everybody. Good afternoon from a rather grey and dull Devonshire landscape, unlike the last week, which was very sunny and beautiful. In answer to that question, it's always a question that's kind of dogged me really, and I've never really come up with any definitive answer other than music, art. I think most of the arts come from the same sort of emotional place in us all, and it's not what the difference is or what the similarities are, it's what we bring to each of those disciplines and those observations. And for me, with my music and my art, I always try to bring an element of soul, an element of my feelings about what I feel for the song or the piece, the painting that I'm doing at the time. And because, as David said, I live in a beautiful part of the country, even as a child, visiting the beach or the moors, which is very close to here, I had an emotional response to these beautiful places. And I believe that is what I try and put into my work. For me, the landscape is a kind of almost like a surrogate mother, really, in as much as I get that deep emotional connection with it, and it speaks to me. So I try and get as much of that into my painting as I can. And then, of course, I've got the technical problem of how to do that, which is something I've been working on and probably will be working on until I decide to shuffle off this mortal coil.
Not soon. I found that, just to interrupt slightly, that when I was looking at your work, when I found out that you were a jazz guitarist, a jazz musician, jazz is, of course, a great improvisational form of music where people, a lot of people are making it up as they go along, they're jamming. When you are working on your painting, are you jamming it as well or improvising, or do you have a clear idea about where you're going in the painting, apart from the view in front of you?
Well, it's a bit of a misnomer to think that jazz improvisation is just making it up on the spot, because you've got a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of musicality and learning, which you then bring into the solo or whatever you're doing. And yes, it's very much improvisation. It's improvisation, knowing that you're going to play in a certain way. And obviously, the more scales you know, the better you're familiarized with your instrument and music per se, then the more able and capable you are of producing a good solo, an inventive, creative solo. And you get to the point where you're almost you're doing it kind of really off the peg. And, that's the joy of playing jazz music, is because you're creating on the spot, in the moment. And with my paintings, I tend to sort of bring that kind of attitude to each painting that I do. It's another challenge, it's another white piece of paper. And obviously I've got my techniques and I bring that into the painting, but each one, it kind of sort of evolves as I go. I know pretty much what I'm doing. It's a bit of a sort of weird question, because I know what I'm doing and I don't. I never know how it's going to turn out, like you never know how a jazz solo is going to turn out. It's a little bit like that. The philosophy behind it is similar. Like in this one, for instance, the sort of riverscape.
Wow.
Quite near me.
Wow.
I never sort of knew what the colours were going to be. You've got this large sort of passage here of dark, and this dark here. And then you've got these beautiful shadows across the river, and they're sort of, yes, I knew what I was going to do, but they're kind of improvised, in the sense that I like the paint to do what it does, rather than me sort of direct it all the time. So I try not to let my I try not to let the painting dictate too much as to how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, when I'm looking at that, Richard, I find that your paintings are a complete song in themselves. We're not trying to guess what's off the page or who's coming next or something. It is a whole performance, and there's a completeness about it, which is very enchanting, wonderfully beautiful work. Congratulations. And also, of course, I've noticed in the last couple of years that you've been travelling the world as well and getting known further afield, which is, there's only good things to come for you, Richard.
Thanks, great. Can I just show you my last picture?
Yeah, please do.
Which again is a very recent one of the seascape I did. One of my favourite parts of the country, which is Thorn Beach, which is not too far away from here, and the cliffs, and the sort of the flora and the fauna and the colours just actually blew me away. So I've done a whole series of these in the last couple of days, and this was actually painted yesterday. But again, it's sort of the sort of almost abstract quality of this is a bit like a jazz solo, if you like. I never quite know how it's going to turn out. Luckily, this one turned out well.
Wow.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good talking to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Absolutely wonderful painting, and there's only good things in for Richard Thorn. So look out for Richard at a concert near you soon, hopefully. We will all meet again, hopefully, in real life at some point. So, moving on, and we'll perhaps come back to Richard a little bit later. My next guest in the flow is a young lady that comes from a beautiful country, which is full of mountains, rivers, lakes, and a great traditional history as well. And she is Vinita Josh Ava from Bulgaria. Now, Veneta paints every single day, she says. She loves nature, not surprising, living in such a beautiful country. And the other thing that's really fascinated me about Veneta, apart from her, I would say, typically European, I think the Europeans have a particular style with their watercolor approach. Like none of us can hide our signatures or who we are, and this comes out through Veneta's paintings as well. But one thing that particularly interested me about Veneta, apart from her paintings, was that Veneta has a huge social media presence, and she has more than 150,000 followers on Instagram. It's quite amazing to comprehend that. And I know that some of the other guests in the other groups in the 24-hour flow have similarly huge followings. It's amazing. So let's go to Veneta. And first of all, Veneta, how are you?
Hi, David. I'm very, very emotional now. When Szczepan called me and told me that what would like to do, I was fascinated by this idea, and he did. That's amazing conversation.
It is amazing. And how do you feel about this terrible virus situation? Has it changed how you work?
I feel very confused about this. In Bulgaria, the virus situation is under control. We don't have a lot of illness people, but everything what happened all over the world is really awful. Spanish, Italy, really, really sad situation. For me, when I have to stay home, it was very good because I have a lot of free time, and I have a lot of time to concentrate and improve my watercolor skills. I have every day, but in isolation, I can stay at home, don't meet with clients. I work only by post. And I have a really free time, which I use by the better way. After everything start finished, I really start painting better.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think generally with all the artists that this pandemic, we already as artists spend a lot of our time in isolation. Obviously the plein air artists go out to meet people, but we're quite used to, aren't we, being in isolation and working on our own and traveling into our own personal zones. And your personal zone is particularly beautiful with the way you treat your watercolors and hit that paper with these wonderful washes. Would you like to show us a couple of your paintings, Veneta, and tell us about your technique?
I really love watercolor, but because this is very, very dynamic material. Everything is happening now. Everything, there are so many surprises. When we talk about watercolor, we talk about emotions. Everything is dynamical. When we start one painting, we didn't know what will happen in the end. And this is really, really amazing for me.
Yeah. Do you, when you start your paintings, Veneta, are you working in your studio or out in the countryside? Do you paint plein air or in your studio, or is it a
I paint only at home. Sometimes I go outside, but I use a lot of water. You see, my painting is very wet, and I feel very comfortable at home, and I can control the water better when I'm in my studio.
Do you use reference photos or images, or do you have your paintings on an iPad?
I'm going outside a lot, and always my head. I watch some photos, but the reality is not important for me. I paint only what I feel. I think that our inside is more interesting than outside. I use nature. I use flowers to express my feelings. But for me, I paint what I feel. This is for me important.
Yes, that's great. I think that's true for most of all the people that are in this program. Everyone paints what they feels. So just turning to your career, Veneta. How did you start to paint in watercolors? Is this something you've always done? Or have you experimented with different?
No. I was a lawyer a few years. I painting just like hobby, but I start doing exhibition in Paris, Warsaw, Poland, everything in Bulgaria. And when I start painting seriously, my brother told me to do Facebook page. This was more than 10 years ago. My brother told me and did the page for me and told me paint 3 times a week. It's very important for social medias to paint regularly. The people start waiting what you will paint. And for me, Instagram and Facebook are very, very important because they take me a feedback. No one of us can paint amazing art every day, but we don't know when we will do. And when we paint regularly, the chance is more big.
Yeah. So it sounds like your brother gave you some very good advice to paint at least 3 paintings every week. And when you're working on a painting, do you work all day on the painting? Do you work in the daytime, at night time?
I paint really very quickly. I do my painting for 2 hours, but I think a lot before that. When I take the brush and start painting, I need hour and half an hour, still 2 hours more. And I can finish one painting. Everything is happening very, very quickly. The water is moving in my paper, and this is very emotional for me and very interesting.
That's great. And do you prefer, well, no, perhaps you shouldn't say, but Facebook and Instagram?
They're very, very different, David. Facebook is for Bulgarian. This is more local media. Instagram is for all over the world. Actually, I love Instagram more because Instagram was a big challenge for me. When I start to create Instagram, it was 2 years ago, and there were so many artists. I thought that there no place for me. But when I start, I was followed by a lot of people from Russia, USA, Iran, Brazil, and this is really amazing. But the most important, in paint regularly. You can't paint 2 times amount and wait a big interest in social medias. This is not possible.
No, I know. We're all having our own battles with social media, and obviously you are much further down the road than a lot of us with so many followers. How many years has it taken you to get 150,000 Instagram followers?
in Instagram only 2 years, and I didn't use ads. This is Swiss magic. I create my Facebook more than 10 years, but Instagram I create 2 years ago, and the first 5,000 people is more difficult. After that, big pages in Instagram will see you, and they start share you. And when one big page share you, you can receive more than 200 people a day, and for a week you receive more than 1,000. But first 5,000 people is more difficult.
Well, that's the way to do it, isn't it, guys?
Sure is.
I think I'll make Veneta my social media manager.
It's a big honor for me, David.
And me too.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Me too.
I love your voice.
Thank you very much, Veneta. I think we've got to move on now because we're pushed for time. And my next guest in this little program, mini program in the 24-hour flow, is someone that is known the whole world over. He's a real gentleman, and his art is inspiring. He seems to make it look absolutely easy, which is always scary. He's travelled the world. He's a very popular tutor as well and demonstrator. And he's also, it's my pleasure to invite him also to take part in the International Watercolor Masters Show, the rescheduled one for next May 2021. It's a great pleasure to have Joe Dowden as one of my guests in this section. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, hello. Hi, David. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
And how are you coping? How are you coping, Joe, with this epidemic?
Well, like a lot of us, I've tidied the place up, tidied the studio up, and I've come across something that will benefit every artist who's ever had paint go dry in the tubes. And it's this. That is a bin full of old tubes. I went through all my old tubes to see what I could get out of them. There's more in there. There's a bag, and there's more here. I'm just going to tip them out for effect. Loads have gone on the floor as well. So there's loads of makes in there, and that's about 22 years worth since I did a product review. But there's one tube that you won't find in there. There's one make, and that is N. Graham. The N. Graham tubes, and this has been a big discovery for me, were all still fluid.
Yeah.
Every time I thought I was going to throw the tube away, no, I'd find there's a little bit more paint in there. Now, I use N. Graham tubes a tremendous amount, and I've always rated them very highly. They're very bright, they're very dense. But that was a massive revelation. And I'm stuck on the painting. I've been doing it for a month, a lot of detail. A lot of the time I do paintings in a few hours, but this one I've used N. Graham tubes because they stay wet, viscose on the palette, if you're with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
the other thing I've found is I experiment with colour. I have an unlimited palette. I admire people with limited palettes, but I've got an unlimited palette. Sometimes I've tried to paint with too many colours. I've painted with 32 colours before, and it's mad. But I'm always experimenting. So one thing I've found is this. I'm just going to put those back. 3 colours. Quinacridone rose, or quinacridone red, or magenta, it doesn't matter. Phthalo blue, just drop the other one. Quinacridone gold. And I've been doing paintings with just those 3. And you can get any colour. So you get a really rich, strong burnt sienna with that. So I'll just show you a painting, one of many paintings I've done. I've done a few portraits as well, but they're gifts for the family, and I never publish them. They're sort of private property. But there's one done with the 3 colours.
Wow.
phthalo blue, quinacridone red or magenta or rose or whatever, they're all pretty much the same result. Phthalo blue, quinacridone magenta, quinacridone gold, which I always describe as raw sienna on steroids anyway. And when you get it from M. Graham, incidentally, they make the tubes out of honey. So I'm going to put that down there. Really beautiful, vibrant colours, and the range you get from 3 colours, absolutely incredible. This is the same place. I'm doing a big version of this at the moment. It's a big painting that I'm stuck on, but that was a step-by-step demo for a book a few years ago. And I hope to have the big one. The big one is dedicated to the International Watercolour Masters, May next year. And we want you to come from all over the world. We want local Brits to come along and see the watercolour heritage. But this is in Britain. This is an incredible place in Eastern Arabia, the Orient of old, Oman. Extraordinary scenes you get there. So that's what I did during lockdown.
Yeah, that's amazing, Joe. I mean, we can even through this virtual world that we're communicating in. I think I speak for everybody. We can recognise the brilliance and the chroma of the paintings that you're doing. They are extraordinary, and you are an absolute natural at the watercolour medium. You must be. It's just amazing. I've also watched you demonstrating, and something that would take somebody else 1 week to paint, you can just knock off. It's just amazing. So it's a real privilege to have you in this group and to actually know you and have you as a friend as well. Is great. So if you were your work is would I be right in saying you are actually in the realist tradition, or are you looking for more abstraction with what you do? Do you feel that you've changed your direction at all, or how you feel about what you paint?
When I started painting, I started painting when I was 6. I was very fortunate. My dad was artistic. He had a friend who was a pro. Took me out painting when I was 6. I was hooked. That was real watercolour. But there was a time when I was struggling to become a so-called professional, whatever that is. And I've done loads of jobs in my life. I've worked on Irish road gangs, building roads. I helped build Gatwick Airport. But professional watercolour. One of the big things that happened to me was actually meeting Richard Thorn and seeing that anything was possible and just having that knowledge that you could do anything. So the big thing for me is most painters say, I'm all about light, but I say I'm all about dark. And the light is the paper. I don't paint with that, I paint with dark. We all have to paint with dark and leave light. Turner's supposed to have said the sun is God. Well, it isn't, but you could say it's his brush. So unless you've got a brush like the sun, you paint with dark. And that's what we do. My brother's a lighting engineer in the music business. He paints with light, he paints with lasers. But we paint with dark. And the most important single thing in my painting isn't colour, it's value, blackness and whiteness, strength of value. And here's a good example of that. I was on my way to the Ashdown Forest, beautiful natural area, and I wanted to paint it. But instead, as I'm driving down the A26 out of Tunbridge Wells, I see this view. I stop on the roadside and manage to take some photos. So I worked that from a photograph. And what that shows is that if you put intense dark in a painting, you can put bright colour from the tube. So 95% of this game, for me in watercolour, is about value. That's tone in the absence of colour, blackness and whiteness.
Yeah, wow. That's absolutely true. The tonal definition. We see tones, don't we? You get to a point in your watercolour life where the tonal definition is the thing. It makes or breaks a painting rather than colours. Colours are a secondary consideration, and you see a lot of great artists on the circuit, we'll call it, who aren't reaching for a colour. they're just mixing whatever it is in that palette left over from yesterday, and somehow it ends up as the colour that they want to use to portray what's in front of them. Could you, Joe, just in a couple of minutes, explain some of your process, what you start with, what's your inspiration, is it something in front of you, and how do you go about replicating that inspiration on the paper?
One, I treat the drawing as a map, and I work out where the lights are, and I protect them. Sometimes I protect them with masking fluid. If you're demonstrating, there isn't time. Two, I mix a ton of paint. I'm laying in for a siege, and I don't want to have to stop and mix paint. And I treat the brush as your gas station nozzle, your petrol pump nozzle. It's got to have colour pouring out of it. And if you run out of paint on the palette, your painting will die. With students, I reckon I could look at the palettes and see whose paintings have maybe not done quite so well. And it's the palette. The key is having so much colour on the palette. If when you get to the end of the painting, you have got no paint on the palette, you've probably overworked the painting by brushing a dry brush into the painting. So if there's one thing, it's just having lots of fluid colour, having a ton of colour. And that's the one piece of advice that I think that's great. That's great advice, Joe. So finally, we often hear that watercolour is a traditional medium, and during this 24-hour flow thing, you'll probably hear that word traditional a lot, particularly with the English school. Where are you on the term traditional medium? Well, I have a funny saying. I'm not saying I'm a great artist, but I'm a traditional painter, and like all great artists, I ignore tradition. That's where I am on tradition. I use it to inform me, and I also use it to look at and say, am I falling into a trap of sticking to some kind of procedure that I don't even know I'm following? So a lot of it is just trying to break away from tradition, but don't disrespect it. Use it, but don't be a slave to it. I'm not a slave to the technique. I'm a slave to what's out there. I want to put that on the paper. So I'm not worried about traditional watercolor technique. I'll do anything I can to get that image down onto the paper.
Yeah, that's great advice, Joe. And I think if there's anybody out there who's not heard of you, they certainly have now, and you've certainly will have converted a lot of people to your amazing painting. So thank you very much, Joe, for spending this time with us. And we'll move on now, because I think we're under some time pressure. So for our next guest, or my next guest, or our next guest in the... where are we? Right, are we back? Joe's disappeared. Oh, he's come back. Okay, yeah. Hi, Joe. My next guest in this little section is, and I'm very privileged again to call this guy my friend. He's a lovely chap anyway, apart from being an amazing painter. He comes from Portugal. He is Portuguese, and he's got a wonderful family there in Portugal, in a little place called Montemor ao Novo, where he lives. He's self-taught, and people around the world will mainly know him for the incredible portraits that he does, mainly of elderly people, although we mustn't find a new word other apart from elderly. We'll perhaps just call them, we'll call them something else, people. And it's a great pleasure to introduce you to Julio Jorge from Portugal. Hi, Julio. How are you?
Hi, David. Thank you very much for the presentation. Hi, people. How are you? Szczepan. It's a big pleasure to me. I'm a little bit nervous.
Huh.
How are you? I'm fine. And David, you said things that I really, I'm speechless, without words. I'm without words.
Yes. Well, Julio, your painting speaks for you,
Thank
because
you.
your work is loved and admired the whole world over, and obviously it's also a great pleasure for me to have you as one of the invited artists at the International Watercolor Masters show in May 2021, along with Joe, who's also in this group, of course. And I've had the amazing honor of receiving your paintings all ready for the show. And 3 days before everything got shut down, all the paintings for the exhibition came back from the framers, which was very expensive. And I've got here, I thought I would start off with you by showing one of the paintings that Julio has in the show.
Oh,
Can you see that?
yeah.
Further back.
We can see Szczepan. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
So move it back.
Oh,
Okay.
stunning.
Now, when I got this painting, of course, I got it as a piece of paper. So I was just absolutely blown away with the technical prowess of Julio and the application of the skin tones and the soft transitions, and the eyes are absolutely amazing. In real life, they look so real. It's fantastic. Julio, please tell us a little bit about your process.
Okay. I start. Say I consider I am a lucky guy because I have a grandfather. I had a grandfather that was a telestorer, and I loved in the winter go to my grandfather's house and sit on the fire and hear the stories that he tells me. And I look for his face and wrinkles of my grandfather. It's passionate me, and the passion remains. And I live in a rural area in Portugal. It's 1/3 of the country. It's the biggest area in Portugal, but we have just only 500,000 people. It's very. There are a few people, and there are older. Many people are elderly people, and I have a lot of models to paint. And I like very much to talk and speak with elderly because they have so many stories of life, and for me it's another thing. It's a social problem we have in Portugal. I don't know.
Yeah. So we can see, Julio, that when you're painting your work, that you absolutely love the subjects that you're painting, the people, and that love comes through in every brush stroke as you work on the work. And what you're doing is you're capturing the essence of these people in your beautiful portraits. They are absolutely fantastic. I've also seen 2 or 3 other types of painting that Julio does.
Yes.
Not just portraits, but I've seen a great tree that you painted. But so the natural landscape is probably, to all of us anyway, it's very, very important and very precious. And I think as artists, we don't just see, we really look and that's what makes artists different from normal people. We look, we don't just see, and we feel what we look. So Julio, you paint not just people that you know. Sometimes you paint strangers. Is that correct?
No.
You don't. you never paint strangers. So you get to know everybody that you paint.
I just paint people that I know because I need to talk to them. And I don't, I can approach to I see faces that attract me a lot, but I don't know the person, and I don't know.
Do you make Do you make lots of drawings of the person first?
Yes.
Draw so that you can,
and I need to talk to them, and I need to hear what they want to tell me, and a portrait is for me it's like a puzzle. It's a construction.
Yes.
It's not a photograph. It's not a photograph. I build my portraits slowly, and very time of observation. I hear Veneta say 2 hours to learn watercolor. For me, a portrait is 2 months. 2 months.
Yeah. That's just. I think it's the same with me, with what I do. I can't get what I want in an hour or two. I have to really spend a long time doing it. It's like a good dinner in my feeling. Why would you want to rush a good dinner? You want to take your time. But sometimes a quick snack is good, Veneta.
Yes, sometimes, yeah. But I can. I try to make a sketch quickly. Yes, but it's not a portrait. A portrait is another thing. A portrait is soul, and is like a puzzle, and I construct slowly, calm, and watching and watching and watching.
You get lost into your own personal world.
Yes,
Like
completely. Yeah, completely.
So, Julio, do you listen to music when you're painting?
Every time. I cannot painting without music. Every time I use music, I listen music, Portuguese music, Brazilian music, and jazz. Lots of jazz.
As well. You should. Now you've met Richard Thorn.
I'm
happy to hook you two guys up. And when we have our International Watercolor Masters party, Richard can come and play the guitar and entertain us. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yes, fantastic. Great.
Veneta can come and sing.
No sing. I'm terrible singer. Terrible.
Just some dancing then.
Fabulous.
Hey, you know what, David? I'll come along and play some jazz if you post up a couple of my paintings in the exhibition.
That'd be great. I might
David.
join in and do a bit of something myself. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's been absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for joining us in this very innovative project that Szczepan has created, the 24-hour Go with the Flow all around the planet. And
Thank you.
Szczepan has already been awake for probably 17 or 18 hours.
I'm getting close. David, thank you very much.
It's fantastic. So thanks everybody, and I'm handing you back to Szczepan now.
David, thank you very much for what was actually an extremely, absolutely mind-blowing, complete presentation. Thank you very much. And can I thank all the fabulous artists? Can I thank you all for coming along today and sharing your time and energy and all the wisdoms and the tips and the advice that you've just brought to bear over the last many years of your experiences in painting. This show just would not be able to happen without people like yourselves, artists like yourselves. So I do truly appreciate your time and energy, and I'm sure the viewers back at home are just gobsmacked with what they've just seen and heard. It's been a truly humbling experience to be amongst you. So can I thank you all? I'll run across. Veneta, thank you. Joseph, Richard,
Thank you, Steph.
Julio, and David, can I thank you all once again for partaking in the Go With The Flow Global Watercolor Conversation. And can I just end by saying what I've been saying all night, and that is especially to our viewers out there who are still waiting to watch the next episodes, grab a coffee, grab some food, grab a comfy seat, and go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
Go with it.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
Yeah.